I stared at my bank account balance for the fifth time that day. $47.32. Not enough for next month's rent. Barely enough for a week of groceries. My phone buzzed with another rejection email from yet another construction company. 26 applications. 26 rejections. The only experience I had was helping my dad with construction jobs during summers in high school, and apparently that wasn't enough for anyone to take a chance on me. Rain tapped against my apartment window as I scrolled through more job listings on my laptop. Most required experience I didn't have, or degrees I couldn't afford. I was about to close the browser when a peculiar listing caught my eye. Night shift clerk needed. Live-in position. Good compensation. Immediate start. The listing was for a place called Garrison & Smith, though it didn't specify what kind of business it was. The ad looked out of place among the sleek corporate postings. It appeared to have been scanned from a typewritten page, slightly crooked with uneven margins. I clicked on it, expecting little. The description was vague. Maintain the front desk from midnight to 6 a.m., answer occasional calls, monitor security systems. The compensation listed made me blink twice to make sure I wasn't seeing things. It was nearly double what I'd expected for such a position, plus free accommodation and benefits. Without thinking twice, I sent my sparse resume. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone rang. "Is this John Miller?" a male voice asked. "Yes, this is John. This is Edward Garrison from Garrison & Smith. I received your application for the night clerk position. Are you available for an interview today?" I nearly dropped my phone. "Today? Yes, absolutely." "Excellent. 4 o'clock then?" He gave me an address across town before hanging up. I arrived at the location 15 minutes early. The building stood isolated on a quiet street, its brick exterior weathered and uninviting. No sign indicated it was a business of any kind. I checked the address twice, convinced I had made a mistake. A few windows showed light, but most were dark or covered. I approached the front door and pressed the intercom button. After a brief silence, a click sounded and the door unlocked. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The interior contradicted the building's external appearance. The lobby featured polished marble floors, dark wood paneling, and tasteful lighting that created a dignified atmosphere. A large desk dominated the center of the room, behind which sat a middle-aged man in a crisp suit who looked up as I entered. "Mr. Miller, right on time." He stood and extended his hand. "Edward Garrison." His handshake was firm, his smile genuine. He had salt and pepper hair and blue eyes that seemed to evaluate me instantly. "Please, follow me." He led me down a hallway to a modest office and gestured for me to sit. I expected the usual interview questions about my experience and qualifications. Instead, Mr. Garrison leaned forward and asked, "Tell me, John, if you found a wallet containing $500 in identification, what would you do?" "What?" The question caught me off guard. "I'd return it to the owner, of course." He nodded slightly. "And if returning it wasn't possible?" "I'd turn it into the police." The interview continued in this vein for nearly an hour. He presented scenario after scenario, involving ethical choices. What would I do if I witnessed a crime? How would I handle sensitive information? How did I feel about working alone? None of the questions related to clerical skills or security experience. "The night shift is a specific sort of job, Mr. Miller," Garrison said finally. "It requires someone of particular character rather than particular skills. The building has its quirks, especially at night. We need someone who can maintain their composure." "Quirks?" I asked. "Old buildings make noises. Systems have their peculiarities. Nothing to worry about." He waved his hand dismissively. "The position includes your own apartment on the 3rd floor. Meals can be delivered or you can use the kitchen on the 2nd floor. Your only responsibility is maintaining the front desk from midnight until 6 in the morning, 6 days a week." "What exactly does Garrison & Smith do?" I asked. "We're a private consulting firm dealing with specialized cases. His vague answer came with a smile that discouraged further questions. Would you like to see the apartment? The reality of my bank account made the decision easy. Yes, I would. So you're accepting the position? Yes, I said without hesitation. When can I start? Something like satisfaction flickered across his face. Tonight, if that suits you. His swift response surprised me, but my empty wallet made the decision simple. Not everyone is suited for the night shift, he added cryptically as he led me to the elevator. But I have a good feeling about you, John. The apartment was small but comfortable, a bedroom, bathroom, kitchenette, and living area with new furniture. The windows overlooked a park I hadn't noticed when approaching the building. Something about the view seemed slightly off, but I couldn't identify what. You'll find the refrigerator stocked. The first week's pay has been loaded onto this card. He handed me a black credit card with no markings except my name embossed in silver. Your shift begins at midnight. I suggest getting some rest beforehand. After Garrison left, I explored my new home. The place was immaculate, as though no one had lived there before. I unpacked my single suitcase, took a shower, and lay down to nap before my first shift. As I dozed, a whisper seemed to come from the wall beside me. I sat up, listening intently, but heard nothing more, just my imagination. I settled back down, then jerked upright when a shadow moved across the wall. Just the trees outside the window, I told myself. Later, while making coffee, I felt someone watching me. I turned quickly but saw only an empty room. In the hallway, the temperature dropped suddenly as I passed a closed door, then returned to normal a few steps later. The building had a presence, almost like it was aware of me. Floorboards creaked behind me when I walked down the hall. Doors that I'd left open were closed when I returned. Once, I could have sworn I heard my name whispered from an empty room. I dismissed these observations as nerves and fatigue. New place, strange circumstances. My mind was playing tricks on me. After exploring my new apartment, I settled onto the couch with a mug of coffee, trying to shake off the strange sensations I'd been experiencing. The wall had stopped whispering. The shadows had stopped their dance across the walls, and I'd convinced myself it was all just nerves from starting a new job. A sharp knock at my door broke the silence. I checked my watch. 7 p.m., still 5 hours before my shift. When I opened the door, Mr. Garrison stood there holding a leather-bound book with worn edges and a deep burgundy cover. Mr. Miller, I apologize for the intrusion. His voice remained as measured as it had been during the interview. I neglected to provide you with our standard operating procedures. He handed me the book. It was heavier than it looked, with a strange warmth that seemed to pulse against my palm. This contains the protocols for your position. I recommend reviewing it thoroughly before your shift begins. He looked at me with an intensity that made me want to look away. Some of these guidelines might seem unusual, but each exists for good reason. I flipped open the cover. The pages inside were yellowed with age, filled with handwritten text in dark ink. Questions can wait until after your first shift. Garrison turned to leave, then paused. One last thing. This building exists at a crossroads of sorts. Sometimes things overlap. Follow the protocols and you'll be fine. A crossroads? I asked. You'll understand soon enough. His expression softened slightly. Remember the rules, Mr. Miller. They'll keep you safe. Before I could ask more, he walked away, leaving me staring at the mysterious book in my hands. Back inside, I sat at the kitchen table and began reading. The rules were bizarre, to say the least. The phone must be answered only on the third ring. Never before, never after. Coffee should be served to any guest who knows your name, but never to those who don't. At 2:15 a.m., place 3 sugar cubes in the potted plant near the east window. At 4:05 a.m., leave a glass of water on the second step of the main staircase. If you encounter a black-haired woman in a hospital gown, proceed immediately to the break room and lock yourself in the freezer until 4:44 a.m. The list went on, each rule stranger than the last. I laughed nervously, assuming this was some elaborate initiation prank for the new employee. Perhaps Garrison and Smith was just a weird place with eccentric traditions. The building had seemed normal enough, despite my imagination running wild earlier. I spent the next few hours trying to memorize the rules, just in case this wasn't a joke. The section about the black-haired woman bothered me the most. The rule book described her in disturbing detail. Unnaturally elongated limbs, hollow eyes, and jerky, inhuman movements. The warning ended with an underlined sentence. Do not speak to her. Do not acknowledge her. She is not what she appears to be. By 11:30 p.m., I'd changed into the provided uniform, a simple dark suit with a small pin bearing the Garrison and Smith logo. I arrived downstairs early, eager to get settled before my shift officially began. The front desk was spotless. A vintage rotary phone sat beside a modern computer terminal. I logged in using the credentials provided in the rulebook and familiarized myself with the layout. A coffee station stood ready nearby, stocked with cups, various brews, and all the necessary accompaniments. When the grandfather clock in the corner struck midnight, something in the building changed. The change was impossible to ignore. The lights dimmed slightly, creating deeper shadows in the corners. The air felt thick and made the hair on my arm stand up. The normal building sounds, the hum of electricity, the distant rumble of heating systems, faded to near silence, replaced by what almost sounded like distant whispers. I swallowed hard and opened the rulebook again, double-checking the protocols. Maybe this wasn't a prank after all. At exactly 12:17 a.m., the front door opened. An elderly man in an impeccably tailored suit entered. His silver hair was combed neatly back, and he carried a cane with a silver handle shaped like a raven's head. "Good evening, John," he said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Room 237, please." I hadn't introduced myself, yet he knew my name. Remembering the rules, I reached for the key cabinet behind me, found the key to room 237, and placed it on the counter. "Would you like some coffee, sir?" I asked, my voice steadier than I expected. "Black, 1 sugar," he replied. I prepared the coffee exactly as requested and handed it to him. He took a sip, nodded in approval, and walked toward the elevator without another word. As soon as he disappeared, I checked the registry. Room 237 was listed as vacant. In fact, according to the system, we didn't even have a room 237. At 1:20 a.m., a woman in a flapper dress and cloche hat entered, her makeup and style straight out of the 1920s. She smelled of cigarettes and French perfume. "Darling, do you have any matches?" She approached the desk without addressing me by name. Following protocol, I produced a matchbook from the desk drawer but didn't offer coffee. She lit a cigarette, blew smoke toward the ceiling, and wandered off down a corridor I hadn't noticed before. The phone rang at 1:45 a.m. I counted silently, 1, 2, 3, and picked up on the third ring. "Garrison and Smith, front desk," I said. Heavy breathing filled the line for 10 seconds, followed by a whispered message. "The angles are wrong tonight. Check the corners." The caller hung up. I stared at the corners of the lobby. They looked normal enough, but when I tilted my head slightly, they seemed to bend at impossible angles for just a moment before snapping back to normal. At 2:15 a.m., I placed 3 sugar cubes in the potted plant by the east window as instructed. The plant's leaves shivered in response, though there was no breeze. A soaking wet man arrived at 2:50 a.m., water pooling around his feet on the marble floor. "John Miller?" he said, his voice gargled as though speaking through water. "Whiskey. Blue glass." The rulebook had mentioned this specific request. I found the blue glass tumbler in a locked cabinet beneath the desk, poured 3 fingers of whiskey from a crystal decanter, and slid it across the counter. He drank it in one swallow, placed the glass upside down on the desk, and left through the front door. When I looked outside, the street was completely dry. The night continued with similar strange encounters. The phone rang periodically, always answered on the third ring. sometimes with breathing, sometimes with cryptic messages about thin places and crossroads. At 3:30 a.m., a loud crash came from somewhere deep in the building. I jumped, my nerves already frayed from the night's events. When the phone rang moments later, I was distracted by trying to locate the source of the noise. 1 ring, 2 rings, 3 rings, 4 rings. I grabbed the receiver on the 4th ring, realizing my mistake instantly. "Garrison and Smith, front desk," I said, my voice shaking. Silence greeted me, but not the empty silence of a dead line. This silence felt alive, watching, waiting. A cold so intense it burned seeped through the receiver into my hand, spreading up my arm. The temperature in the lobby plummeted. My breath frosted in the air. The lights flickered violently, some bulbs exploding in showers of glass. The shadows in the corners grew and darkened, seeming to move with a life of their own. The rulebook on the desk flipped open by itself, pages turning rapidly until stopping at a section I hadn't noticed before. In bold red letters, it read, "When protocols are broken, seek shelter immediately." The lights went out completely, plunging the lobby into darkness. The rulebook's red warning seemed to glow in the pitch blackness. "When protocols are broken, seek shelter immediately." A bone-chilling wail shattered the silence. It started low, then rose to an inhuman pitch that made my ears hurt and my stomach clench. The sound bounced off the walls, impossible to pinpoint. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. My phone's flashlight revealed nothing at first as I swept it across the lobby. Then the beam caught something moving at the edge of my vision. I turned toward it and froze. A woman stood in the hallway entrance. Her hospital gown hung loose on her unnaturally thin frame. Her black hair fell in dirty strands over her face, but not enough to hide her hollow eyes. Literal hollows, dark empty sockets that somehow still watched me. Her limbs bent at impossible angles, too long for her body. Her head tilted sharply to one side, neck stretched beyond what should have been possible. The rulebook's warning flashed through my mind. If you encounter a black-haired woman in a hospital gown, proceed immediately to the break room and lock yourself in the freezer until 4:44 a.m. She took a step forward. Her movement was wrong, jerky and fluid at the same time, like a glitching video. One moment she was 10 feet away. The next, she seemed to skip forward several feet without taking steps. I ran. I bolted toward the back hallway where I'd seen the break room during my brief tour. Behind me, the woman's rasping breath grew louder. The sound of bare feet slapping against marble floors accelerated, faster than any human could run. The break room door appeared ahead. I slammed into it, fumbling with the handle. The lights flickered weakly inside, revealing a small kitchen area and the metal freezer door at the back. I sprinted across the room as the black-haired woman's silhouette appeared in the doorway. The freezer handle was stiff, requiring all my strength to pull it open. I threw myself inside just as elongated fingers reached for my back. The heavy door swung shut with a metallic clang. Inside, emergency lights bathed everything in a dim blue glow. Metal shelves lined with frozen food packages surrounded me. The temperature couldn't have been more than 20 degrees, but fear kept me from feeling the cold. A deafening bang rattled the freezer door, then another, and another. The woman's fists pounded in an uneven rhythm, making dents in the metal from the outside. "Let me in, Michael," a distorted voice rasped. The woman knew a name that wasn't mine. "Let me in. I need your help." Her fingers scraped along the door, nails screeching against metal. The sound was extremely painful to hear. "You don't belong here," she hissed. "Neither of us belongs here." Hours passed in that freezing room. I huddled in the corner, watching frost form on my uniform sleeves. The pounding never stopped. Sometimes it grew softer, making me think she might be leaving, only to return with renewed fury. Sometimes her nails dragged slowly across the door, tracing patterns I couldn't see. At some point, she began to speak again in that horrible, rasping voice. I know you. You know me. They took your memories, Michael. They took everything. I pressed my hands over my ears, but her voice seemed to bypass them completely, reaching me anyway. You promised to find me, she said. You promised. The emergency light in the freezer blinked on and off, my only indication that time was passing. I checked my watch, 4:30 a.m. Only 14 more minutes. My teeth chattered and my fingers had gone numb. The cold finally penetrated my fear. At exactly 4:44 a.m., everything stopped. The pounding, the scratching, the voice, all ceased at once. The sudden silence was almost as terrifying as the noise had been. I waited 5 more minutes, counting each second before finally working up the courage to push open the freezer door. The break room was empty. No sign of the woman, no evidence of the pounding that had dented the metal door from the inside. My legs shook as I made my way back to the front desk. The building felt different now, quieter, calmer. Gray morning light filtered through the windows. The lobby looked perfectly normal. Mr. Garrison stood at the front desk, reviewing some papers. He wore the same crisp suit as yesterday, looking completely unfazed by what had transpired. When he saw me, he checked his watch. 4:57. You can end your shift a few minutes early, given the circumstances. I stared at him, unable to process his calm demeanor. My voice came out hoarse. What was that? Who was she? You answered on the 4th ring, he stated matter-of-factly. Common mistake for first-timers. He set down his papers and pulled out a leather-bound book similar to the one he'd given me before, but thicker. This is a revised rule book with additional guidelines. You'll need to study it before tonight's shift. I took the book with trembling hands. Never look directly at the ceiling between 2-4 a.m., he continued. Always play static on the radio at 1:15 a.m., and place salt lines at doorways after visitors wearing red depart. The woman called me Michael, I said. Why would she call me that? Something flickered in Garrison's eyes. Recognition, perhaps, or concern, but his expression quickly returned to neutral. Entities like her often confuse people. They see things differently than we do. Pay it no mind. I should have quit. Any rational person would have walked out after experiencing what I had. Yet something held me there, a peculiar sense of belonging I couldn't explain. The building seemed weirdly known to me in ways that made no sense. The rules, the visitors, even the black-haired woman. There was something about all of it that connected with me on a level I couldn't understand. Mr. Garrison studied my face. A knowing smile touched his lips. Get some rest. Tonight will be better, he said. His tone suggested he'd seen this reaction before, this inexplicable connection to a place that should have sent me running. As I returned to my apartment, exhausted and confused, the hallways seemed warmer than before. The lights brightened slightly as I passed. My door swung open easily at my touch, almost welcoming me back. I collapsed onto my bed. The revised rulebook clutched against my chest. I had many questions, but exhaustion won out. As I drifted into sleep, I could have sworn I heard the walls whisper, "Welcome home, Michael." I followed the new rulebook exactly. At 1:15 a.m., I played static on the radio. Between 2 and 4 a.m., I kept my eyes firmly away from the ceiling. I lined doorways with salt after visits from anyone wearing red. The protocols became second nature, almost like muscle memory, as though I'd done these countless times before. No further incidents occurred. The black-haired woman didn't return. The building kept getting odd visitors from seemingly different times and places, but everything remained stable. I answered the phone exclusively on the 3rd ring. I served the right beverages to the right people. I placed sugar cubes in plants and glasses of water on stairs exactly when required. Changes began in my apartment first. I noticed a leather-bound book on my coffee table one morning when I returned from my shift. The cover had detailed symbols that seemed to change when viewed from different angles. I didn't remember bringing it, yet I felt no alarm at its presence. Something about the weight of it in my hands felt right. 3 days later, A brass pocket watch appeared on my nightstand. It ran normally for hours, then suddenly backward, the second hand ticking counterclockwise before correcting itself. Again, I felt like I knew it somehow. The fountain pen materialized next, sitting in a holder on my desk that I also didn't recall owning. The pen wrote in ink that changed colors mid-sentence, blue transitioning to green, then purple, then back to blue. I found myself unconsciously reaching for it whenever I needed to write notes, as if I'd used it for years. My 8th night marked the beginning of a different kind of strangeness. The elevator doors opened at 2:30 a.m., revealing a silver-haired woman in an elegant pantsuit. She walked confidently to the desk. "Jenkins, Agent Jenkins, it's good to see you back at your post," she said, then stopped abruptly. Her confident expression faltered as she studied my face. "I apologize. I meant Mr. Miller, of course." According to protocol, I showed no recognition. "Good evening, ma'am. How may I assist you?" "Just checking on building security. Standard procedure." She glanced around nervously. "Any incidents to report?" I kept smiling professionally. "Everything has been running smoothly." "Would you like some coffee?" I asked, following the rulebook guidance for visitors who knew my name. "Black, 2 sugars," she replied automatically. I prepared her coffee. She watched me closely, something like concern in her eyes. "The integration seems to be proceeding well," she murmured, more to herself than to me. She accepted the coffee, took a sip, then set a small business card on the counter. "If you experience any discomfort, please call this number." The card read, "Interdimensional Psychiatric Services," with a phone number beneath. No name, no address. "Thank you," I said, pocketing the card. She nodded and left, casting one last look over her shoulder before walking down a corridor. The next night brought a maintenance worker pushing a cart of tools. His uniform had the Garrison and Smith logo, but I hadn't seen him before. "Evening, Chief," he said casually as he signed the logbook. "Building's been quiet since you've been back." I offered no acknowledgement of the title. "Do you need access to any restricted areas tonight?" He chuckled. "Still playing by the book, I see. Remember that mission in Sector 7? You broke every protocol in the manual to get us out alive." He shook his head fondly. "Those were the days." My stomach tightened. His words triggered nothing specific, yet they felt strangely right. "Coffee?" I offered. "The usual," he replied. I handed him a mug of black coffee with a shot of espresso, though I couldn't recall how I knew that was the usual. More visitors came over the following nights. A woman who asked about the dimensional change readings. A man who thanked me for saving his team in the collapse. An elderly gentleman who reminisced about the academy days. Each spoke to me as if we shared a history. Each time I kept up my professional appearance while feeling increasingly lost. The 10th night of my employment began like the others. I arrived at 11:45 p.m., reviewed the logs from the day rotation, and prepared for the midnight change when the building transformed into something more than a simple office. At 3:42 a.m. precisely, the front door opened. A woman entered. Her movements were confident but cautious, her dark eyes scanning the lobby before looking at me. The moment I saw her, something broke in my mind. The small scar above her right eyebrow triggered a flood of images. Her face in candlelight across a restaurant table. Her laugh on a windy beach. Her tears of joy as I slipped a diamond ring onto her finger. She approached the desk slowly, watching my reaction. "John Miller?" she asked, though her tone suggested she knew exactly who I was. "Yes. How may I help you?" My voice sounded distant to my own ears. "I need to speak with you about an urgent matter." She stood directly across from me now, close enough that I could smell her perfume, vanilla and something spicy I couldn't name but somehow knew. "Would you like some coffee?" I offered mechanically, sticking to protocol. She ignored the question. "We were engaged," she stated, her voice steady but tinged with emotion. before they wiped your memory and reassigned you here. I felt dizzy. More fragments surfaced, her head on my shoulder as we watched a sunset, her voice whispering plans for our future, her fingers intertwined with mine. "I don't know what you're talking about," I managed to say, though the denial felt hollow even to me. She reached into her jacket pocket and placed a photograph on the counter between us. I looked down at the image of us standing together in front of this very building. We wore matching uniforms with a strange insignia I didn't recognize, but somehow knew represented something important. My arm was around her shoulders. We looked happy, professional, but undeniably connected. "I've been searching for you for months," she continued. "Your real name isn't John Miller. It's Michael Jenkins." Michael Jenkins. The name the black-haired woman had called me. The name Garrison had whispered. The name that felt more real than the one I'd been using. "Who are you?" I asked, though part of me already knew the answer. "Vanya Petrova." Her eyes never left mine. "Your fiancé, your partner, and I'm here to bring you home." After Vanya left, I returned to my apartment and stared at the photograph she'd given me for hours. Every time I looked at our faces, more fragments surfaced. Conversations I couldn't quite remember, places I'd never been but somehow recognized, feelings for a woman I supposedly loved but barely knew. Sleep didn't come. Each time I closed my eyes, I saw Vanya's face or caught glimpses of the black-haired woman in the hospital gown. Sarah Chen, a name that meant nothing to me consciously but disturbed something deep in my fake memories. By the time my shift began, I was running on coffee and nervous energy. The night proceeded normally. Visitors came and went. The phone rang, always answered on the third ring. And I followed every protocol in the rulebook exactly. Yet something had changed. I found myself studying each visitor more carefully, wondering which were human travelers and which were something else. At precisely 2:17 a.m., movement caught my eye. A section of wall near the east corridor shimmered slightly, then separated to reveal a doorway I'd never noticed before. Vanya stepped through, carrying a thick manila folder. "You're back," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. I promised I would be. She approached the desk with purpose, her dark eyes scanning the lobby for other visitors. She placed the folder on the counter. Bold red letters across the top read, "Department of Interdimensional Transit, Agent Michael Jenkins." "What is this?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "Your life." She opened the folder, revealing documents, photographs, and credentials bearing my face but a stranger's name. The life they made you forget. I flipped through the pages slowly. Personnel reports detailed missions I had no memory of conducting. Performance evaluations praised skills I didn't know I possessed. Medical records documented injuries I couldn't recall receiving. "This says I'm a senior field agent," I murmured, staring at a security clearance badge with my photograph. "One of the best." Vanya's voice carried a hint of pride. "You specialized in interdimensional anomalies and entity containment." I turned to a section marked Incident Report, Operation Threshold. The pages were heavily redacted, but what remained showed something bad happened. "There was an accident," I said, scanning the document. Vanya nodded. "A catastrophic mission failure. Several agents died when a dimensional boundary collapsed during an extraction attempt." My fingers stopped on a personnel page with a face I recognized. The black-haired woman from the freezer, except her appearance was normal in the photograph. The name beneath read, Sarah Chen, Field Specialist. "My partner," I whispered. "Yes." Vanya's expression softened. "After the incident, you volunteered for memory suppression. The psychological trauma was severe. You couldn't forgive yourself for what happened to Sarah and the others." I closed the folder, suddenly overwhelmed. "Why are you showing me this now?" "Because you deserve to know the truth, and because we need you back." The grandfather clock chimed 4 a.m., startling us both. I remembered one of the rules. "We need to avoid looking at the ceiling," I said automatically. Vanya nodded and gestured toward the small sitting area in the lobby. Over there, we'll be safer. We settled into the leather chairs, positioned to keep our eyes away from the ceiling. Above us, something moved. A subtle sound like fabric against fabric, but magnified and distorted. This building isn't an ordinary structure, Vanya explained, keeping her voice low. It's a nexus point where multiple dimensions intersect. The visitors you've been receiving are travelers from other realities, and some are entities that take human form to cross over. I thought back to the wet man who drank whiskey from a blue glass, the woman in the flapper dress, the maintenance worker who called me Chief. And the rule book? I asked. Not arbitrary. Each protocol is based on interdimensional metaphysics, scientific principles governing how different realities interact. The sugar cubes in the plant? That feeds an entity that helps stabilize the eastern boundary. The water on the staircase prevents temporal bleed-through from the upper floors. She leaned closer. Michael, the black-haired woman. Sarah, she's not a threat. She's trapped between dimensions. During the failed mission, her physical body was caught in a collapsing boundary. What you see is her consciousness trying to maintain cohesion in our reality. But the dimensional displacement distorts her appearance. She called me Michael, I said. She knew who I was. Of course she did. You were partners for 5 years. You led the rescue mission to try saving her. A memory flashed, Sarah's hand slipping from mine as swirling energy pulled her away. Her scream as reality itself seemed to tear around her. Following the rules helps stabilize her existence, Vanya continued. When you broke protocol by answering the phone on the 4th ring, you temporarily destabilized the building's dimensional alignment. That's why she appeared so distorted and aggressive. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything. And Garrison, who is he really? Director of Nexus Operations. He selected you specifically for this position. Why would he place me here if I'd had my memory wiped? Vanya's expression became complicated. The night clerk position is therapeutic in a way, keeping you connected to interdimensional work while shielding you from the trauma of your memories. Some agents eventually recover naturally in this environment. She hesitated, then added, the building itself helped. It's semi-sentient, not fully conscious but aware in its own way. It selects employees with specific neurological patterns that allow them to perceive interdimensional phenomena. The building chose me? The idea seemed absurd, yet I'd felt that strange connection from the beginning. The whispers, the sense that I knew it somehow. It recognized you, even if you didn't recognize yourself. Vanya reached into her jacket and removed what looked like a badge. I can take you back to headquarters for complete memory restoration. Our medical team has made advancements since your procedure. She placed the credentials on the table between us. Or you can continue here. Some agents find peace in forgetting. I stared at the badge, seeing my face alongside the name Michael Jenkins. Everything and nothing about it felt real. Could I go back to a life I couldn't remember? Should I stay in this strange existence where at least the rules made sense? The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. I reached for the phone and picked it up. Garrison and Smith, front desk. The boundaries are thinning, a gravelly voice whispered. Check the east corridor at dawn. The veil part's easiest then. Understood. Protocol 17 will be implemented, I replied, following the script from Section 4 of the rulebook. Good. The alignment approaches. Prepare accordingly. The line went dead. I placed the receiver back in its cradle and turned to Vanya. The badge with my real name still rested on the table between us. I stared at it, thinking about how this decision would change my life. I need to stay, I said finally. There's something unfinished here. Vanya nodded, no surprise registering on her face. I thought you might say that. Sarah. I hesitated. The name seemed both strange and known to me. She's trying to reach me, isn't she? Yes, your connection was always strong, even before the accident. Vanya reached across and squeezed my hand briefly. I'll help you. I can provide more information about your past, controlled doses, so you're not overwhelmed. I felt relieved. I wouldn't face this alone. Thank you, I said, surprised by the emotion in my voice. The grandfather clock struck 5, marking the end of my work time. The building settled into its daytime setup, more normal, less strange. Over the next 2 weeks, my world changed. Vanya visited daily, bringing photographs, mission reports, and personal items from my previous life. We created a routine, meeting in my apartment after my work ended. The process was careful. Small pieces of my past introduced in order to prevent psychological shock. The first memory appeared unexpectedly during my 3rd night working after meeting Vanya. I was placing the customary glass of water on the 2nd step of the main staircase when a flash hit me. A training session in a sterile white room, instructors drilling protocols into a group of recruits. My hands automatically made complex gestures while my mouth recited dimensional stabilization codes I didn't consciously remember learning. I stumbled back, gripping the banister as more fragments filled in. Specialization in trans-dimensional communication, years of studying boundary mechanics, the satisfaction of mastering protection rituals that could hold reality together at its weakest points. Each night brought more memories. Vanya's patient guidance helped me navigate the confusing rush of returning knowledge. She confirmed memories as they surfaced, filling gaps when necessary. Our shared history came back gradually, first meeting at the academy, working separate divisions until a joint mission brought us together, falling in love during late nights, analyzing dimensional anomalies, my proposal on the rooftop of department headquarters under an aurora created by a dimensional alignment. The building responded to my awakening memory. One morning, returning to my apartment after work, I noticed a door where there had been only wall before. The brass knob turned easily under my hand, showing a small workroom filled with specialized equipment, monitoring devices, reference books on dimensional physics, and a map table showing overlapping realities. "You're remembering," a voice said behind me. I turned to find Director Garrison in the hallway watching me. "The building recognizes you again," he continued, stepping inside. "These spaces have always been here, but they're only accessible to those whose minds are attuned to interdimensional frequencies." More rooms appeared in the following days: laboratories, observation chambers, and meditation spaces designed for dimensional attunement. Hallways extended beyond their previous endings, showing a complex that existed both within and beyond conventional space. Director Garrison began including me in administrative meetings, discussing boundary stability reports and interdimensional transit schedules as though I'd never left. "You were our best agent," he explained one evening in his office, a space that seemed to change when viewed from different angles. "Even with suppressed memories, you have instincts others lack. That's why I placed you here as night clerk, to keep those instincts sharp while your mind healed." He handed me a file marked Operation Threshold Complete Analysis. "It's time you understood what happened," he said. I read the file in my apartment that night, Vanya sitting quietly beside me. The mission had been a rescue operation, a research team trapped in a collapsing pocket dimension. Sarah and I led the extraction team. The operation went smoothly until the final moments, when the dimensional boundary became unstable. Sarah stayed behind to hold the portal open while the researchers escaped. When I went back for her, a catastrophic collapse occurred. She was caught between worlds, her body scattered across dimensional planes while her consciousness remained partially anchored to our reality. The trauma of losing her, combined with injuries sustained during the collapse, had left me with severe dimensional psychosis. Memory suppression had been my choice, a temporary measure until my mind could heal enough to try again. 3 days later, I encountered Sarah during my work time. This time, when she appeared in the east corridor, I didn't run. Her body remained distorted, limbs too long, movements unnaturally jerky, but I could see glimpses of the woman I once knew. "Michael," she rasped, her hollow eyes somehow conveying recognition. "The alignment is coming. Third attempt." I nodded, suddenly understanding from my recovered memories. "I'll be ready this time, Sarah." "Protocol book," she managed before fading, the effort of manifestation clearly draining her. "Incomplete." The rule book. I retrieved it from the desk and began reviewing it with new understanding. Each rule served a specific purpose in maintaining dimensional stability. The coffee for named visitors established quantum recognition patterns. The sugar cubes fed entities that reinforced weak points in reality. The glass of water created a reflective surface for dimensional echoes to dissipate harmlessly. But Sarah was right. It was incomplete. With recovered knowledge guiding my hand, I began adding notations in the margins. Clarifications on timing for certain protocols, modifications to ritual elements based on celestial positions, new procedures for handling specific types of interdimensional travelers. The building responded to these changes immediately. Lights brightened when I walked through hallways. Doors opened before I touched them. Room temperatures adjusted to my preference automatically. What had been acceptance became partnership. The semi-sentient structure working with me to strengthen the dimensional boundaries. Director Garrison noticed the change. "The building hasn't responded to anyone like this since its construction," he remarked during one of our meetings. "You've always had a special connection to this place, even before your memory suppression." "It feels like an extension of myself sometimes," I admitted. "That's because it is, in a way," he replied. "Your dimensional frequency resonates with the building's core. It's why you were chosen for this position." My duties expanded beyond the night clerk role. I continued manning the front desk, following protocols to maintain basic stability, but now spent daylight hours working in the newly discovered laboratories, analyzing dimensional readings and preparing for what I now understood was coming, a rare alignment that would create a window of opportunity to rescue Sarah. Vanya arrived one evening carrying several metal cases marked with the department's insignia. Her expression was both determined and cautious as she placed them on the map table in my workroom. "Specialized equipment," she explained, unlocking the first case to show a device that resembled a silver compass with multiple needles and glowing crystals embedded in its face. "Dimensional tethers, stabilization anchors, and quantum positioning systems. Everything we'll need for the rescue attempt." The second case contained specialized clothing, suits made of material that changed subtly under the light, designed to protect against dimensional radiation. "The alignment is in 3 weeks, Vanya said, unpacking the equipment with practiced efficiency. "We'll only have a 17-minute window when the boundaries between dimensions thin enough for extraction." I ran my fingers over the equipment, muscle memory recognizing their functions before my conscious mind could name them. "Will it be enough this time?" Vanya's eyes met mine, fierce determination in her look. "It has to be. We've learned from the past failures, and this time, you remember who you are." I nodded, feeling responsible but excited about finally completing what I'd started, bringing Sarah home. The building hummed around us, its walls pulsing faintly with energy, as if encouraging our preparations. For the first time since awakening in this strange existence, I felt fully present, aligned with both my past and my purpose. The night clerk position had never been my true role. It was just the beginning to who I really was. Michael Jenkins, interdimensional agent, tasked with monitoring the very rift that had claimed my partner and now offered the chance to save her. The spring equinox marked exactly 1 month since Vanya had found me and 26 days since my first recovered memory. As the sun set, I felt the building change subtly around me, not physically, but dimensionally, as layers of reality began to move against each other. "Tonight's different," I told Director Garrison as we reviewed final preparations in the newly revealed command center behind the lobby wall. "I can feel it in the air." "The thinning has begun," he confirmed, his fingers moving quickly across holographic displays showing energy readings throughout the building. All standard protocols are suspended until dawn. The barriers between worlds weaken significantly during the equinox. I nodded, surprised by how natural this all felt now. The command center hummed with activity as technicians calibrated equipment and agents checked specialized gear. Dimensional maps projected on the walls showed overlapping realities changing in real time, colors mixing where boundaries weakened. Your mission is simple in concept, complex in execution, Garrison continued. Stabilize the rift enough to retrieve Agent Chen from dimensional limbo. 3 previous attempts have failed, but never with your direct involvement. I knew what he meant. The first attempt occurred immediately after the accident. The second happened while I was recovering in medical. The third took place after my memory suppression. Each time, the rescue teams couldn't establish a stable enough connection to pull Sarah back completely. This time will be different, I said with certainty that surprised even me. The front doors swung open, and Vanya entered with 6 additional agents in specialized containment gear. They pulled wheeled cases of equipment behind them. Transport team is on standby, Vanya reported, stepping into the command center. Dimensional anchors are placed at all cardinal points around the building. She handed me a suit similar to those worn by her team, dark material that changed subtly under the light, designed to protect against dimensional radiation while maintaining flexibility. You remember how to use all this? She asked as I examined the quantum tethering device on the wrist component. Muscle memory's coming back, I replied, strapping the suit on with practiced efficiency I didn't consciously remember learning. By 10 p.m., the building's interdimensional activity had reached unprecedented levels. Visitors from distant timelines appeared in the lobby without using the front door. Entities barely maintaining human shape glided through walls. The phone rang constantly, voices speaking languages that hadn't existed for centuries or wouldn't exist for millennia. I manned the front desk out of habit, though the rulebook lay closed beside me. Tonight, rules didn't apply. The walls occasionally became translucent enough to see shadowy figures moving in parallel spaces. 2 hours until peak alignment, an agent announced over the comm system. Vanya approached the desk, now fully geared up. Ready? I nodded, feeling strange calm settle over me. Where's the primary aperture forming? Basement level, where it happened originally. The memory flashed, Sarah screaming as the dimensional collapse began, my desperate lunge to reach her, the searing pain as reality tore around us. At midnight exactly, the building shuddered. Lights flickered and died. Computer systems failed. In the sudden darkness, only the emergency backup generators maintained minimal power to essential systems. That's our cue, Vanya said, activating the luminescent strips on her suit. Mine automatically followed suit, casting us in a soft blue glow. We navigated corridors that seemed longer than they should be, passing rooms that hadn't existed hours before. The building's architecture was fluid now, responding to the dimensional instability. Twice we encountered other agents, guiding confused visitors to safe rooms. The stairwell to the basement stretched beyond normal perception, each step taking us farther from conventional reality. Temperature dropped with every floor until our breath fogged in front of us. We moved with difficulty, as if pushing through invisible currents. When we reached the basement, I stopped in shock. The entire level had transformed into a vast chamber that couldn't possibly fit within the building's physical dimensions. In the center, a jagged crack in reality pulsed with eerie blue light. Swirling energy patterns spiraled outward from the rift, disturbing the air and creating a constant low humming sound. The primary breach point, Vanya explained, moving carefully toward monitoring equipment already set up around the perimeter. This is where Sarah was lost. I approached the rift slowly, feeling increasing pressure against my skin as I got closer. The specialized suit absorbed most of the dimensional radiation, but I still felt the pull toward the rift. Initial readings show multiple reality layers intersecting at this point, called one of the technicians. Dimensional integrity at 27% and declining. I unclipped equipment from my belt, devices Vanya had provided that now felt familiar to use. A quantum stabilizer, recalibration tools, and the most important item, a dimensional aperture widener. Working from recovered memories and instinct, I began the process of carefully expanding the rift's opening while maintaining its structural integrity. My fingers moved in precise patterns, adjusting dials and positioning sensors around the perimeter. "Reciting frequency patterns now," I announced, my voice sounding distant to my own ears as I began speaking words that weren't quite language. Mathematical sequences translated into sound, designed to harmonize with the rift's natural frequency. The blue light intensified, casting everything in sapphire shadows. The rift expanded slowly under my guidance, edges becoming more defined rather than jagged. Through the opening, I glimpsed fragments of other realities, cities built vertically into impossible heights, vast empty landscapes bathed in purple light, oceans where water flowed upward. "Aperture stable at 40%, Vanya confirmed from her monitoring station. "Proceed with containment field generation." For nearly an hour, we worked methodically, expanding the dimensional doorway while reinforcing its boundaries. The other agents moved in practiced coordination, placing quantum anchors at precise intervals around the rift. Then something changed. The blue light flickered, darkened, then flared with new intensity. The rift pulsed, sending a shockwave across the room that knocked 2 agents off their feet. "Contact initiated," shouted one of the technicians. "We've got dimensional crossover." In the center of the rift, a figure began to materialize. First as a shadowy outline, then gaining substance. Sarah appeared fully for the first time, suspended in the air within the dimensional gateway. Her body fluctuated rapidly between human and something else. Something stretched and distorted that hurt my eyes to look at directly. Despite the distortions, I recognized her immediately. Not the terrifying entity from the freezer, but the woman in the photographs, my partner, my friend. "Stabilization protocols," I called out, moving closer to the rift. "Quantum tethers engaged." I activated the device on my wrist, sending out a beam of energy that connected to Sarah's fluctuating body. The tether created a fixed point of reference in our reality, giving her consciousness something to anchor to. "Sarah," I called, "focus on my voice. Find the pattern." Her hollow eyes, now appearing and disappearing as her body changed, looked at me. A terrible sound emerged from her, part scream, part static. But I saw recognition in the briefly human features that surfaced between distortions. "Tether holding at 60%, Vanya reported, initiating secondary containment field. She moved to the opposite side of the rift, deploying equipment that generated a cylindrical energy field around Sarah's fluctuating body. Our movements synchronized perfectly, muscle memory from years of joint training coming back naturally. "Michael," Sarah's voice came through distorted and muffled. "It's pulling me back. Stay focused on this reality," I instructed, adjusting the tether strength. "Find your anchor points." For the next 3 hours, we worked in perfect coordination, adjusting tethers, recalibrating the containment field, countering each attempt by the void to reclaim her. Sarah's body gradually stabilized as we worked, the horrific distortions becoming less frequent, her human features remaining visible for longer periods. Other agents rotated shifts, spelled each other when equipment needed adjustment, but Vanya and I remained constant, the primary anchors in the operation. My hands moved with increasing confidence as more memories surfaced, techniques I'd developed myself during years of interdimensional work. Dimensional integrity stabilizing, called out a technician at 3:30 a.m. Subject cohesion at 65% and rising. Sarah now looked mostly human, though still translucent in places. She hung suspended in the containment field, eyes closed, her body occasionally shuddering as dimensional energies discharged around her. "Almost there," Vanya encouraged, her voice strained from hours of concentrated effort. "Field strength maximum." By 5 a.m., sweat soaked through my dimensional suit, and my muscles ached from maintaining precise positions for hours. The first gray light of dawn filtered through windows that shouldn't have existed in a basement, another sign of the building's fluid reality during the thinning. With a sudden flash of blue light and a sound like thunder, something changed. The rift contracted sharply, then expanded one final time. Sarah's body became fully solid, dropping gently onto the cushioned extraction platform we'd positioned beneath her. "Dimensional extraction complete," announced the lead technician. "Subject stabilized." Sarah lay unconscious but breathing steadily, now completely human. No distortions, no flickering, just a woman in a hospital gown who looked exhausted but whole. "She'll need comprehensive rehabilitation," Vanya said, checking Sarah's vital signs. "Her consciousness has been scattered across multiple realities for months." I nodded, relief washing through me as I looked down at my former partner. "But she's back. She's really back." Behind us, the dimensional rift began to change. The jagged edges smoothed out, the pulsing blue light faded to a gentle glow, and the opening gradually contracted. The walls solidified, and the architecture returned to normal parameters. "The rift is healing itself," I observed, watching dimensional readings return to baseline levels. The building's structure is reintegrating across realities. Medical staff arrived with specialized transport equipment, carefully transferring Sarah to a containment stretcher designed to maintain dimensional stability during recovery. I watched them work, feeling simultaneously exhausted and lighter than I had in months. As they prepared to move her to a recovery facility, Sarah's eyes fluttered open briefly. For just a moment, they were clear and focused, looking at me across the room. "You found me," she whispered, before slipping back into unconsciousness. The medical team wheeled her toward the stairs, which now led normally to the main floor instead of stretching into infinity. Around us, the basement had returned to its standard dimensions: storage areas, maintenance equipment, normal concrete walls. Director Garrison arrived with the security team as dawn broke fully, the equinox passing and dimensional barriers strengthening once more. He surveyed the site with evident satisfaction. "Impressive work," he said, reviewing readings on a tablet handed to him by a technician. "Your instinctive understanding of Nexus mechanics made the difference this time." I nodded tiredly, helping Vanya pack up the specialized equipment. It felt natural, like I'd done it 1,000 times before. "That's because you have." Garrison placed a hand on my shoulder. "You've completed what you started months ago. The mission that cost so much is finally resolved." I thought about those words as we ascended to the main floor. The building seemed different now. Normal lights functioned again, computer systems restarted, and the lobby looked exactly as it should. A perfectly ordinary hotel entrance with no sign of the night's extraordinary events. "What happens now?" I asked as we watched the medical team load Sarah into a specialized transport vehicle. Garrison smiled slightly. "That depends on you, Agent Jenkins. Your position as night clerk was always temporary. A rehabilitation assignment while your mind healed. Your real position at the department remains open." I looked at Vanya, whose eyes showed quiet support, then back at the building that had become both workplace and home. "I think Michael Jenkins is finally ready to return to duty," I said. 3 months after we pulled Sarah back from the dimensional void, I stood at the front desk where it all began. The lobby still looked ordinary to untrained eyes. Polished marble floors, tasteful furniture, and the grandfather clock that had guided my protocols. But I knew better now. Every corner, every surface held meaning in the complex web of realities that intersected here. I traced my fingers over the desktop where I once placed the visitor logbook. That simple leather-bound volume had been replaced by a holographic interface that appeared at my touch. Even the rulebook had evolved, its cryptic instructions now digitized and integrated directly into the building's systems. The department had formally established permanent headquarters within the expanded interior of the Garrison and Smith building. What once appeared to be an ordinary office structure now openly showed its true nature, at least to those with clearance to see it. The dimensional architecture was now fully accessible, with laboratories, training facilities, and monitoring stations occupying spaces that existed partially outside conventional reality. I checked the dimensional stability readings on the interface. All boundaries were holding steady. No unusual fluctuations were detected. The building's semi-sentient systems hummed with quiet efficiency, recognizing my presence as I completed my morning inspection. Sarah passed through the lobby, nodding to me with a smile. Her recovery had progressed remarkably well, considering the months her consciousness had spent fractured across multiple realities. Occasional nightmares and momentary disorientation were the only lingering effects of her ordeal. "Quarterly medical stats are looking good," she said, stopping at the desk. Her posture was confident and professional. She looked nothing like the sick person I remembered from the freezer. Dimensional displacement symptoms are responding well to the new protocols. As head of the medical division, Sarah now used her unique experience to treat other agents suffering from dimensional exposure. Her personal knowledge of displacement made her uniquely qualified to develop therapeutic approaches impossible for doctors without first-hand experience. "How many patients now?" I asked, genuinely curious about her progress. 17 active cases, down from 23 last month." Pride tinged her voice, well earned after everything she'd endured. Sarah headed toward the eastern corridor where the medical wing had been established. I watched her go with a feeling of accomplishment. The partner I'd once failed to save now walked these halls confidently, her expertise helping others who suffered similar fates. The elevator doors opened, and Vanya emerged, surrounded by a group of field agents in specialized gear. Their suits bore the unmistakable signs of recent dimensional travel, faint luminescence and subtle distortions around the edges. Vanya's leadership of field operations had transformed our approach to interdimensional work. Under her direction, we'd established contact with similar nexus points discovered globally. What had once been isolated outposts now formed a coordinated network monitoring dimensional stability worldwide. The agents dispersed to debrief, and Vanya approached, the small scar above her right eyebrow catching the light. The sight still triggered memories, now complete and integrated rather than disjointed fragments. "The Taipei Nexus is fully operational," she reported. Their building manifested similar properties to ours. Same semi-sentient responses, same dimensional fluidity. I nodded, processing the implications. That makes 5 confirmed nexus points. The network is growing. Vanya leaned against the desk, her posture relaxing slightly. "Remember when you thought you were just a night clerk at a weird hotel?" The memories seemed simultaneously recent and distant. I remembered the confusion, the desperate adherence to protocols I didn't understand, the terror when the black-haired woman appeared in the freezer. Those memories existed alongside decades of training, field operations, and interdimensional expertise that had returned fully over these months. Sometimes I still expect to wake up in that apartment, with nothing but the rule book to guide me, I admitted. Vanya's hand found mine briefly. The simple contact helped me focus, as it always did. Our relationship, rebuilt through recovered memories and new experiences, had grown in ways I couldn't have imagined during those confused early days. "The ceremony preparations are finalized," she said. Sarah approved the dimensional harmonics. "The courtyard will be stable across all 5 primary realities simultaneously." The building's courtyard, a space that existed simultaneously in multiple dimensions, would host our small wedding ceremony the following day. The significance wasn't lost on me. Our union would be witnessed across realities, which seemed right for people who worked to maintain balance between worlds. "I should finish my rounds," I said, reluctantly pulling away. My role as Nexus Guardian meant constant vigilance, maintaining the building's integrity while facilitating safe passage for legitimate travelers and containing threats to dimensional stability. Vanya nodded, understanding the responsibilities that came with my position. "I'll see you at the briefing." I made my way through the building, checking anchor points where reality grew thin. My fingers traced specialized sigils embedded in door frames, adjusting their energy output with small gestures that once seemed mysterious but now were simple to do. Each room, each corridor was important in the intersection of dimensions. Director Garrison found me in the Western Observation Chamber, a room whose windows looked out on 5 different realities simultaneously. I sensed him before he spoke. "The Council was impressed with your quarterly report," he said, coming to stand beside me at the window. "Your insights about voluntary memory suppression are changing our approach to training." I nodded, watching a purple sky in one window pane while crimson lightning forked across another. I now fully understood why I had chosen memory suppression. It wasn't just because of the trauma from the failed mission, I acknowledged. It was a planned immersion. The decision had been made before Sarah's accident, a controlled experiment to experience the Nexus from a newcomer's perspective. By suppressing my trained awareness and expertise, I generated insights about dimensional phenomena impossible for experienced agents to perceive. My confusion, my fear, my gradual reawakening had all been valuable data about how untrained consciousness interacted with interdimensional spaces. The accident that trapped Sarah had simply accelerated the timeline, adding genuine trauma to what would have been a more controlled procedure. "Your experience has revolutionized our training protocols," Garrison said. "The new recruits benefit from your documented perceptions." The mysterious job posting that had once seemed my last desperate option now represented my main purpose. Every confused moment, every terrified reaction to inexplicable phenomena, every intuitive response had been recorded and analyzed, creating training materials that helped new agents understand the Nexus on a fundamental level. "The building chose well," I said, watching the realities move and blend in the windows. "It always does." Garrison smiled slightly. "Some things transcend even our understanding. The Nexus points select their guardians for reasons we may never fully comprehend." That evening, I completed my rounds alone, greeting visitors from across the dimensional spectrum by name. The wet man who drank whiskey from a blue glass nodded respectfully as I passed. The woman in the flapper dress winked conspiratorially. The maintenance worker who had called me chief touched his cap in salute. I no longer needed the rule book to know which protocols applied to which visitors. The dimensional mathematics that had once seemed like arbitrary superstition now represented clear scientific principles I understood implicitly. The sugar cubes in plants, the glasses of water on stairs, the static played at specific times, all worked together to maintain balance between realities. Standing in the lobby as midnight approached, I watched the building change subtly into its night configuration. The walls became slightly permeable, allowing glimpses of adjacent realities. The air seemed electric with the energy of worlds pressing close against our own. Once, this transformation had terrified me. Now it felt like coming home. Some people spend lifetimes searching for belonging, for purpose, for meaning. I had found mine between worlds, with Vanya beside me in a building that was both workplace and home. The phone rang precisely at midnight. I answered on exactly the 3rd ring, smiling at the known voice on the line. "Dimensional alignment proceeding normally," I confirmed, watching the subtle movement of reality around me. "All boundaries secure. The Nexus is stable." I replaced the receiver and settled in for the night work, comfortable in the knowledge that I protected the space between worlds most humans never knew existed. The grandfather clock chimed, marking the hour when reality was thinnest.